Hello and welcome to Indian Standard Time. I'm Siddharth Varadarajan, and joining me today is a very special guest, former Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Khurshid Mahmud Kasuri. You were Foreign Minister from 2002 to 2007, what we in India regard as the Musharraf years, and you are the author of a much commented and very interesting and highly readable book, Neither a Hawk Nor a Dove, which is, of course, about Pakistan's foreign policy in general, but you have a lot of interesting material on the bilateral relationship. You are one of those rare Pakistani politicians who, of course, have an India connection because you're from your mother's side. They were refugees from India, and you have family members here. And of course, during the time you were in the Pakistani Foreign Office, and in your work subsequently, you have been a champion for better relations between India and Pakistan. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
I want to, in a sense, give a chronological feel to this interview. And let's start with the time you assumed charge at the Foreign Office back in 2002, a moment of great tension. Parliament had been attacked in India at the end of 2001. Forces were deployed on the border. Operation Parakram was in full swing. How did you and your Indian counterparts at the time manage to bring about a shift from the tension of that time to first the ceasefire along the line of control, and then, of course, that seminal meeting between Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Pervez Musharraf in Islamabad in January 2004, which set the ball rolling for the resumption of a normal relationship? How did you manage that?
If I am to speculate, why did they make me foreign minister? I'm just speculating. My views were known, although President Musharraf asked me in my very first interview, and this is the General Musharraf of Kargil, Kasuri Saab, are you a hawk or a dove? And I said, Mr. President, you'll find out in due course. I don't know what was going through his mind. They could not have been completely ill-informed.
But he knew Sattar, who was your predecessor, was hawkish.
Yes, but he, after all,
Right.
I had made a clear choice. My name had been mentioned for prime ministership, and I was not made. Probably people like me rarely make it to the top because I'm outspoken in my views. Right. And President Musharraf himself said that I considered you and one of the gentlemen who actually did become prime minister for prime ministership, Mr. Jamali. And I was generally upset at that time, and I was asked which office give off choice of three. I said not interested. I was prepared to go home, and I said Foreign Office because I had views on it. And they accepted it. Although they asked me thrice to give my choice, I said I'm not giving any choice. Now that I look back, was President Musharraf thinking of a change? I don't know. Oh, he'll have to tell the people someday.
And this was actually a time of great tension between the two countries.
And when he asked me a question, I said, you'll find out in due course. Yeah. Now, the point is this. Now, this is speculation. Number two is it was Operation Parakram, and that was on, and 1 million soldiers eyeball to eyeball. But you know, the world had changed. I'll give credit to President Musharraf for one thing. He was a fast learner. The man of Kargil became a statesman towards the end. Although he himself was a refugee from India, from Delhi actually, and he must have heard lots of atrocious stories of how Muslims were thrown out of Delhi. And then he fought wars against India. Then he was a man of Kargil. So such a man must be given credit for learning fast. He knew after 9/11 the world had changed. And I think that did influence. Then, although Pakistan and India are very big countries, we are smaller compared to you, but we are giants compared to the biggest European countries. The comparison Pakistan and India also always makes us look small, but it's not a small country. But, you know, I think President Musharraf realized very, very quickly. Of course, I already had those views that it is not possible. I believe that you cannot have a hostile relationship with India all the time. Makes no sense. So we have to change the paradigm. Now, I think he also realized that this was not going to work perpetually. And then the new relationship with the United States also played a role. And so what I was saying is that both countries are very big, so don't misunderstand me. We were not operating under pressure. And because I'm going to mention United States' role,
But how was the ice broken? I mean, did you?
I think
you know,
first
for
the
example, the
9/11
ceasefire
and
itself.
number two, United States Day. For example, Colin Powell spoke to me personally on many occasions, which I have reported in the book, but the famous hand of friendship by Mr. Vajpayee. He mentioned to me, that's I'm very careful. It's not under American pressure, either India or Pakistan. But you know, I'm just trying to tell you what may have been working on President Musharraf's mind. He rang me and said, you'll be soon hearing good news from India. And then very soon we heard that he said, but you have to, you know, prepare your own prime minister, your own president. So there must have been an American role directly as far as I'm concerned, but behind the curtains, even as far as Musharraf was concerned. Right. So I think let's not completely gloss over it.
Right.
US was vitally interested that at that stage, Pakistan and India should not further escalate their tensions. It would have interfered with their own direct interests in the area, in Afghanistan. Pakistan was an American ally. But I thought it was a golden opportunity. I'd been always wanting to change the paradigm in South Asia. So after this, there was famous hand of friendship. We just went at, you know, at the speed of a bullet train.
Right.
Because when he said that, we were ready to welcome that statement, and Prime Minister Jamali immediately invited him to visit Pakistan. And after that, the back channel started operating. So I think what really happened is there was desire on both sides.
And the back channel at that time was played by?
At that time, it was Mr. Brajesh Mishra. And I must...
And on the Pakistani side, yourself?
No, I'm not the back channel, the
right,
foreign
exactly.
minister.
No, yeah.
It was Mr. Tariq Aziz.
Okay.
So the back channel came into operation, and I had meetings with Mr. Brajesh Mishra in Pakistan, in India, in Berlin, all over the place. And I got to know him very well. And I also understood from him that the BJP was very interested in a resolution on Kashmir. Right. In fact, you know, we were quite upset when BJP lost. Not because we had anything in common with their ideology.
But let's not get ahead of the narrative. So you managed the ceasefire through a back channel, and then there's the famous Vajpayee-Musharraf meeting of January 2004.
Absolutely.
How difficult was it for Pakistan? Because the deal maker, as it were, the icebreaker, was this commitment that Pakistan gave to India that it would not allow territory under its control to be used for acts of terror against India. How difficult was it for Pakistan to accept that kind of formulation?
Divided on this issue.
Okay.
Our hardliners, right of center, have not been happy with Indian policies on Kashmir. And there's a very strong feeling on behalf of Kashmir. But as I said to you, the role of government is very important, I've realized. Once government takes certain decisions, and that includes Pakistan Army, there may be people who do not agree with that policy, and there were many in the army, I'm sure, who didn't agree with our policy. But once an institutional decision is taken, and Pakistan Army is a professional army, those who disagree tend to mute their voices, at least while they are in office. But in fact, when the narrative is positive, you are able to convince a majority of officers, whether they're in the armed forces or a majority of the people as well, that's good for Pakistan. So I think there was a positive narrative building that, you know, we've suffered a lot, so many wars, and now there's a big peace dividend. So the narrative became very positive, and I was particularly keen on promoting a narrative which was positive. I took a lot of flack from India and from Pakistan, because India is historically a status quo power. They didn't like that I was continuing to talk and say that, you know, things are changing. Even on Kashmir, we are making progress. And hardliners in Pakistan were very upset with me because they didn't wish a settlement along those lines. But why was I thought there was method to my madness. I wanted to prepare the people, because I knew what was happening on the back channel, because he himself told me, Brajesh Mishra, personally, we can resolve Kashmir in 6 months. Right. Now, I never got to know what was in his mind, but he knew Pakistani position. So obviously they were going to show flexibility. And some statements he made still stand in my mind. He said, you know, pull back from Siachen, I know will please Pakistan Army. It was an unexpected statement, gave me an inkling into the mind of the BJP at that time. And he repeated it later on when he was not in power. So having moved from there, Dr. Manmohan Singh wins elections, Natwar Singh becomes foreign minister. I was very apprehensive because we made a lot of progress.
But Mr. Natwar Singh had a reputation for again being quite open to good relations with Pakistan. What made you apprehensive? Was it just a change of...
No, change.
Okay,
Not
change.
Mr.
Change
Natwar
itself.
Singh.
Okay,
No,
right,
sorry.
okay.
Don't misunderstand. It was the change of government.
Right, okay.
The Congress, you just as, a lot of people in Pakistan who privately tell me that the best thing that could happen is what I have written in the book. But when they go publicly, they belong to PPP or PMLN. Oh, they say, no, nothing could be worse than this. It was a complete sellout. And they go to the TV and say, it is amazing. And I challenge you, any one of these parties when it's in power will have to come back to this.
So you were apprehensive. Change of government has happened.
I just simply,
And-
because the Congress had not been very positive about BJP's role in promoting a dialogue with Pakistan. So yes, then I was...
So how easy was it to pick up the back channel threads again?
No, but Natwar Singh must get credit for that. I didn't know that he had that sort of, he had been High Commissioner in Pakistan. But when I met him, I found him very positive. This was in China. And I found him to be a strong-willed person. And he said, let's change history. I said, I'm very keen. Or I said, let's change history. I don't know. But he said, I'm even keener than you. I'm older than you. Let's do something. And then, of course, the back channel was operating, and we understood that the new government would carry forward what the BJP had started.
So now it was Tariq Aziz on the Pakistani side and, of course, Mr. Sati Lamba on the Indian side. And they had a whole series of meetings, the details of which have not been officially disclosed. But you have some startling revelations in your book. Tell us what you can about what the back channel formula that was emerging was all about.
Back channel formula took 3 years. It wasn't easy because the military and the ISI, because I can only speak for Pakistan, I'm sure similar thing must have happened in India. There is no way you can resolve anything to do with India or on Kashmir without the military sitting, because you had so many wars. In any country where there's a situation of hostility, the military acquires greater influence. And the army has, because our eastern and western borders have been very, very, particularly the western border has been very unsettled since Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan. So the military has a direct input. So they were sitting on the table, as was the ISI. And there used to be grave objections to what was coming from India. And they took their time. Then they would give their suggestions, and a non-paper would go from our side. People similarly on the other side had objections to what we were proposing. That's why it took 3 years to harmonize completely contradictory positions. India is a status quo power, was a status quo power, and said there'll be no change in borders. Pakistan's, and which really meant you keep what you have, and we'll keep what we have. This is completely unacceptable, not because Pakistan wants Kashmiri territory, not at all. We're a big country. Kashmiri territory is not going to make a major difference. No, it's the sentiment involved. It's the people of Kashmir involved. And most Indians do not understand. And I wish to highlight that to you. Kashmir is not just Kashmiri people. It is the major cities of Punjab. Lahore, Rawalpindi, Gujranwala, Sialkot are Kashmiri dominated. They are Punjabis, but they are Kashmiris. The Prime Minister of Pakistan is a Kashmiri. The Defense Minister of Pakistan is a Kashmiri. Many senior military officers are Kashmiris. Top businessmen are Kashmiris. Now, they are not Kashmiris who came to Lahore about 20 years ago, 50 years ago, or at the time of partition. They've been there for 200-300 years. For example, before partition, the only competitors against Kashmiris in the political arena were the Arais. And sometimes the Arais would win, sometimes the Kashmiris.
But what was the breakthrough that the two sides were able to come to?
The breakthrough is when we started realizing that actually the positions on either side were not as rigid as was being said publicly. So these conflicting positions that we said we will not accept status quo, then I was scared whatever we did, if the Kashmiris in Indian administered Kashmir rejected it, it will be curtains for us. People of Pakistan would reject it. So I was very keen to meet Kashmiri leaders. And I am grateful to Natwar Singh, because when he said to me, no, I said they should be sitting on the table of their future. He said, no, we are not prepared. Indian government and Indian public opinion is not prepared for that. So I said, okay. I tried to then explain to him that, if we want a compromise, that compromise has to be sold. And if I have to sell it to the people of Pakistan, first the Kashmiris, Indian-administered Kashmir must at least give their input, must accept it. So that's why I started meeting them in India, Pakistan, and even in third countries, sometimes even secretly, because I wanted to understand that this is what is evolving. At least 75 to 80% should accept it. Well, Hurriyat, for example, I was not able to convince Sayyid Ali Shah Gilani towards the end. Right. But I have a feeling that if he had been given more time, I might have convinced him, because our government had lost, that he should at least accept it in the first instance, because it's good for the Kashmiri people. But we thought that if 75 to 80% of Kashmiris, Pakistan Indians could be satisfied, so we needed to harmonize these conflicts. What did the Kashmiris want? Right. They privately told me, in Indian-administered Kashmir, we don't want a division of Kashmir. We don't want Muzaffarabad on one side, Srinagar on the other. So ensure that there is one solution which envisages all of them together.
Which was the famous concept of soft borders that
then soft borders emerged out of it. But the Indian government added another element to it. One was the Kashmiri element. The Kashmiri element is the one that I am referring to. They didn't wish any, because they
didn't want any partition or division.
They didn't want any partition. But the Indian government said, no, we have to include the northern areas. Right. If there is to be a settlement, because a part of the Maharaja of Kashmir's old territory.
But it was part of undivided J&K.
But we said, why? They had revolted against the Maharaja. They had imprisoned his governor. The governor's imprisoned. There's a lot of books on the subject. They wanted accession to Pakistan. And in fact, one of their grievances against us has been that we have not been given the status of a full province in Pakistan.
So how was this obstacle dealt with?
So then, after a lot of to and fro, we came with this formula. Because to be very frank, under no circumstances will Pakistan allow any external ingress into Gilgit-Baltistan, because of our strategic link with China. So we had to have a solution in which this could be preserved, in which the Indian insistence that the old Maharaja's territories should be included, the Kashmiri insistence that the Kashmiri territory should not be divided, and so we came forward with a package which would take care of Indian concerns, Pakistani concerns, and Kashmiri concerns. Kashmiris said to us, two things first. Otherwise, if our lives are not made easier, forget about any long-term solution. Demilitarization and self-governance that Pandit Nehru and Sheikh Abdullah initially agreed on. They said, without this, it makes no sense. You can do other things later. So we came forward with joint mechanism because we wanted to break the status quo. Right. A status quo could not be sold either to Kashmiris or to the people of Pakistan. And I've explained earlier, if Kashmiris rejected it, people of Pakistan would reject it as well. So we came across this ingenious thing. Okay, we will consider it one for certain purposes, but not for others. But how do you say it? So we said, okay, there will be two units. One which is with Pakistan currently, one which is with India currently. But the states of Pakistan and India would be, or the respective territories on both sides, they would be able to, Pakistan and India would be able to divide those into units, whether 2 or 3. So we've got 2 units, and you may well have 3, Ladakh territories and Jammu, and that may have been envisaged by, I don't know, but we speculate that that is what was in their mind, that if they want, currently you are 1 unit, we have 2 units, but it allows that you can have more than 1 unit, which means you can have 2, 3, 1, whatever you like. But we did put in that while doing it, culture and ethnicity will be taken into consideration. You can't just cut it at random. So that brought in the formula that our link with China to Gilgit-Baltistan cannot be touched, which means there'll be no military ingress, either ours into into Ladakh or yours into Gilgit-Baltistan. But for ordinary people, they can travel wherever they like in the old princely state, which meant they can take a bus. The Indians said no change in borders.
So in a sense, territorial...
So we said no borders then. No borders. Which means for Kashmiris at least, there'll be no borders, no passport, no visa. I even wanted, which I didn't succeed, that Indians and Pakistanis be allowed to go without visas into Kashmir, so it becomes a Switzerland of sorts.
So we're looking at the formula, if I understand you correctly, is de facto territorial status quo, but on the ground, I mean, in reality, for Kashmiris as at the first instance, and perhaps later for other Indians and Pakistanis, the ability to cross these lines and live in some ways
As you know, words
as
are
one
very,
unit.
Words are very. Those are words by you. Those are not my words. My words are: if there is to be no change in the border, there's be no border. Then Kashmiris will travel without passports and visas.
Right. Now it's been 8 years since India and Pakistan reached some kind of understanding. Since then, you left office. President Musharraf is history. The government has changed in India. What's your sense of, and neither on the Pakistani side nor on the Indian side at the official level do we hear much appreciation for the work that was done on the back channel. What's your sense of the commitment of important stakeholders on both sides today to that kind of thinking, that kind of formula?
The most important on Pakistani side, because we've had, as I told you, difficult borders with India, with which we had many wars, and difficult borders in Afghanistan since Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan. So a very important actor, let's not beat about the bush, is the Pakistan Army and the intelligence. I mean, there's no sense in sort of not accepting facts. Right. Because when you have so many wars, how is it possible the army which has to fight is ignored? So unless they accept it, now I am prepared to challenge anybody. People used to tell me, no, it was only because of Musharraf. And once Musharraf left, it was over, and the army repudiated what Musharraf was doing. It doesn't happen like that. Army is an institution. And if you want any proof, thank God for the WikiLeaks. They have conclusively proved that 2-3 years after I left office and Musharraf was nowhere on the scene, Ann Patterson, the American ambassador, who had met me, and I had explained to her the contours which are now explained in the book, met General Kiani and General Pasha. General Kiani was then Chief of Army Staff and General Pasha was DGI ISI. And they not only agreed with what I was saying, I'd even suggested Riaz Muhammad Khan, former Foreign Secretary, as back channel negotiator. They even accepted that. So this is a conclusive answer to those who says, so why is General Rahil Sharif saying these things these days? My answer is tactical response. Why? First, you've had very harsh statements coming from your side. You can rest assured we are both South Asian, inhabiting the same space. We think alike, and a tit for tat is to be expected. So if you say something hard, you will have a harder statement there.
So you're saying there's a lot of tactical posturing, but that the underlying, that there is still buy-in.
Even the other point I was going to make is tactical. Then the army's position began to harden as your army's position began to harden on Siachen. Then army's position hardened as the end game in Afghanistan started. I regard all this as tactical. Why not strategic? Strategically, the army is a professional army. They understand that the definition of national security doesn't change so quickly. And what is national security? Not simply military preparedness. It is political stability, economic prosperity. The ground realities haven't changed. So I, on the basis of my experience, feel that if there is a just and fair settlement of Kashmir, Pakistan Army will go along with it.
Kasuri Sahab, we're almost out of time, but in the minute and a half that we do have, give us your sense of the current stalemate. Because India and Pakistan made a promising beginning. Nawaz Sharif Sahab came for Modi's inauguration, Prime Minister Modi's inauguration. But since then, things haven't stabilized. If anything, we seem to be in a worse position than we were a year ago. What are the prospects for the two sides to pick up the threads of dialogue again?
It's not simply because I'm an optimist. It's because I'm a realist. I feel these countries have no option. You can say, well, they can ignore each other. A policy of benign neglect. Canada can ignore United States. Argentina can ignore Peru or whoever. No. The relation Pakistan-India will never remain like this. With positive impetus, it will go like this. With a negative, with nothing doing, it will go like this. So if you don't want it to deteriorate further, you will have to do something to control. And there are very strong elements on both sides who want it to deteriorate. And those are people I don't have to tell you, because when I was coming to India, there was Samjhota Express. When my successor came, there was Mumbai. When President Clinton came, there was Chhattisgarh Singhpura. And when whoever comes, something happens. And there are bomb blasts here, there, or in Pakistan, or in India. So therefore, and we are always accusing RAW, you're always accusing ISI. So the point is, having said that, the recent statement by Mr. Mohan Bhagwat,
of the RSS, yes.
The RSS chief, cannot be underestimated. Came after WUFA. It came despite the hostility.
That India and Pakistan are neighbors and we have to live together.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that realization Prime Minister Modi has. So what is the way out? Appoint a back channel negotiator. Don't initially even announce that you appointed one because you don't want to have a negative reaction in your public. After you begin to make a bit of progress, the back channel, announce that there's a back channel so that you raise the morale of the people. I was doing it constantly so that people feel there is hope. And I think that's the only way. They should not meet publicly. They should meet, have a cup of tea, handshake, smile, whatever they can, but no joint statements. A joint statement has to be well thought out, otherwise you'll have oofahs galore. So you must take sensitivities of both sides into account. I think that's the only way out.
Mr. Khurshid Kasuri, neither a hawk nor a dove, but always an optimist. Thank you very much for joining us on Rajya Sabha.
Thank you for having me over.
That's it for this episode of Indian Standard Time. Do join us again next week with another guest. Thank you for watching.